Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, at the top, I want to remind everybody to rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And yeah, subscribe, leave me a comment. I'll leave my social media links in the show notes. So subscribe, follow me, let me know what you think. So yes, I am recording on a Sunday, which is something I don't normally do. But I did want to go ahead and make this podcast because I want to talk about the events of last Thursday. Um, Let me go ahead and start this out by saying I am an internet optimist. I am a social media optimist. I'm a big fan of social media. I have a lot of fun on it. I've seen a lot of really wonderful, great things happen on social media. I've seen complete strangers just come out of the woodwork to help other complete strangers find animals, raise money, just promote awareness of a cause. So I'm not somebody that is typically negative about the effects of social media. But last Thursday, we kind of had three things happen based around the ugly part of social media that I wanted to go ahead and talk about. And that's, first of all, the Kevin Williamson firing from The Atlantic, which I touched on in my last podcast because the news of that actually came down right before I recorded the last podcast. Also last Thursday, we've got the story coming out of Paul Nehlen doxing Ricky Vaughn. And then we also had Owen Benjamin getting kicked off of Twitter and getting kind of kicked off YouTube. From what I understand, he can't live stream anymore. I don't know if he can actually post just regular videos, but he is no longer allowed to live stream, and he has been kicked off Twitter. I want to go ahead and start with the Kevin Williamson firing. Like I said, I know I kind of addressed it on my last podcast, but I want to go a little more in depth with it and try to explain what my issue is with this. And that is, I don't have any particular love for Kevin Williamson. I mean, he's a fine enough writer. I don't really agree with a lot of the things he says. But my issue with how this went down is that basically, here's how it happened. Kevin Williamson was a writer for National Review. He was there for years. There's a huge body of his work. Had his own Twitter feed, which I do believe they scrubbed before he was hired at The Atlantic. But basically, what happened is the editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldblum, decided that he wanted to go and poach Williamson from National Review to bring him over to The Atlantic to be a conservative voice on their new opinions section. So that's what he did. He got Williamson, he brought him over to The Atlantic. And from all indications, he knew who he was hiring. It's not a secret about Kevin Williamson's stances, and the thing that kind of blew up about this is people went back to a tweet and a podcast he had done some time back talking about how he views abortion as murder and that people who have abortions performed should be charged with murder. And then he made a comment that his preferred method of death penalty for these people would be hanging. But then he walked it back saying that he's not a fan of capital punishment or the death penalty. But, of course, the walk back is not what got the attention. It's the original statement that got the attention. And then it kind of blew up on Twitter. I know a lot of people within The Atlantic were pissed off about the hiring in the first place. A lot of people jumped on his ass on Twitter for hiring him. And basically, what Goldberg ended up doing was issuing an email, which, dude, seriously, a fucking email? But he issued an email on Thursday basically saying that he fired Williamson. And the way it was worded, it seemed a little sketchy to me because it seemed like Goldberg was kind of passing off responsibility for not knowing about Williamson's stances on this, which makes no sense because he had actually come out prior to that defending the tweet in question. And then you want to walk it back and pretend like you knew nothing about nothing and this was all news to you. Which, dude, no, that's a dick move. Like, how are you going to go and get somebody from another publication who you know who they are and what they stand for, bring them to your publication, and then not stand behind your hiring and standing behind this writer and basically throwing them under the bus? And that was just a monumentally shitty thing to do. Especially if you are the editor-in-chief, it's your job to make these hires and to defend it. And if people don't like it, if people within the publication don't like it, if people outside the publication don't like it, who gives a shit? It's your hire. If people don't like it, tell them to go kick rocks. You don't throw somebody under the bus who you just took time to go out and get from another publication. This was not somebody who was just unemployed and you gave them a job. You specifically went after this person. And then you allowed them to be savaged and then fired them. What is anybody supposed to think that either currently works for the Atlantic or would think about working for the Atlantic under you? And I don't just mean conservative voices. I mean people that, even lefty voices that currently work for the Atlantic. I mean, the Overton window of what is and is not acceptable moves on an hourly basis. So if I was a writer for the Atlantic, I would be looking at this like, okay, maybe I wrote a piece a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. And if somebody all of a sudden decides that this isn't appropriate, my editor-in-chief's not going to have my back. You're going to let me get savage. You're going to throw me under the bus. Who would want to work under those circumstances? The whole situation just struck me as incredibly, incredibly unprofessional and a shitty thing to do. And I would, like I said, give a lot of thought, if I was somebody currently working for the Atlantic, whether or not I wanted to stay in that environment, knowing that if somebody decides that something that I wrote or tweeted or said on a podcast or whatever is all of a sudden inappropriate, that my editor-in-chief's not going to have my back. Moving on from that, the second thing that happened on Thursday was Huffington Post posted a piece about how Paul Nealon had doxed Ricky Vaughn, which Ricky Vaughn is not Ricky Vaughn's real name. That's his internet handle, and I'll continue to use it just for the sake of simplicity and also because I don't like this situation at all. Because first off, I want to say, yes, these are alt-right people. No, they're not the brightest bulbs in the package, but you do not dox people. One more time. You do not dox people. One more time for the people in the back. You do not dox people. I actually tweeted out that I am so old, I remember that the two worst things you could possibly do to somebody on the internet would be to dox them or to out them. And I know we've all figured out that Paul Nealon is pretty much subhuman, but this just drops you a little further down in the subhuman categories, because not only did you dox somebody, you doxed one of your own. And you don't fucking do that. You do not turn on your own people. You don't dox them, especially over what he doxed them for, which is basically what's going on in the alt-right right now is there's kind of like this little battle. You've got two separate camps of people. You've got the Paul Nealon types who really want to take it in more of that Charlottesville, very aggressive, very violent direction. And then you got guys like Ricky Vaughn who are wanting to tone that down and try to go in more of a sort of propaganda/rhetoric direction. And they think that that's soft. So because of that, and that alone, that warranted being doxxed. And so Huffington Post did a piece on this where basically they took it and ran with it, which I suppose I should be more angry at HuffPo for doing this, but I understand that this is what it is, and if they didn't do it, it would have been BuzzFeed, it would have been Vox, it would have been some other outlet that would have did this story. So I don't like it, and I mean, I read the whole story, obviously, and I felt a little gross afterwards because, and this goes to why I'm so anti-doxing. When you dox someone, it's not just the person that you're doxing that gets hurt. Friends, family members, siblings, employers, the schools you went to, everybody connected to you gets dragged into this. And that's why it's so disgusting. It doesn't just hurt the one person. It hurts widening bands of people. And that's why you do not do that. You don't bring people into this fight that have nothing to do with it. You don't ruin people's lives, first of all, even if you feel like you have a reason to do it. But it's not just that person's life you're ruining. You're ruining wide amounts of people's lives. Everybody that's connected to this dude, now their name is out there on the internet. They're getting God knows how many phone calls, emails, text messages, death messages, what the fuck ever people feel like they need to do to these people, because all of a sudden you're connected to this dude and you probably didn't even know he ran this Twitter account. You probably knew nothing about it, but now they have to deal with this. And to do it for such a petty reason, it just, I can't wrap my head around this one. It's just so needlessly mean and cruel to people that didn't deserve it. I mean, even Ricky Vaughn didn't deserve this. And I mean, alt writers are vile, especially the hardcore alt writers like him. But there's there's a point where you have to at least step back and be like, that person didn't deserve that. And anybody wanting to applaud that kind of behavior just because of who it happened to, all I have to say to that is, there but for the grace of God go you. So I know there's a lot of you out there, you don't post under your real names, you post under pseudonyms, you post under assumed names, whatever. That's you. Everybody has their reasons. But imagine how you would feel if it was you. If somebody decided that you did something, you said something wrong, you held the wrong view, and they decided to put your name out there in the public sphere, and the next thing you know, your parents are out there, your siblings, everything about your life, I would be beyond livid if anybody posted up my family's names on the internet and exposed them to that. So if you're going to be against doxing, you have to be against it no matter who it happens to. Even if you think that person is vile and the scum of the earth, you still have to at least say that nobody deserves that, even somebody like that. Ultimately, how this story ended up is that Gab actually kicked Paul Nealon off of Gab, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but Nealon may now be the first person ever in the history of Gab to get kicked off of Gab, which should show you exactly how gross doxing is. If you've ever been on Gab and you see some of the things that people write on there, I mean, it's their prerogative, it's free speech, but this got Nealon kicked off of Gab. Like, you have to be pretty fucking shitty to get kicked off Gab. And damn it, you managed it. So, congratulations to you. Hope you're happy now. I know there's a lot of people in the alt-right that basically want to see this dude gone now. I know there's some people that are celebrating it because they don't agree with Ricky Vaughn, but it seems to be that even the alt-righters can agree that that was fucked up. And so if everybody on the alt-right can agree that you fucked up, dude, you fucked up. And so the third thing that came out on Thursday was that Owen Benjamin was kicked off of Twitter and I guess can no longer live stream on YouTube. I do believe his channel still exists, but he can't do live streams, which he was doing live streams on a daily basis. So obviously this is quite impactful for him. This is a weird one, and I kind of have some different feelings on this that are kind of a little beyond the scope of what I want to talk about today. Hint, hint, future content alert. But I do kind of want to address this because this is the first time I've ever seen somebody get bounced off of Twitter and YouTube at the same time. I've seen it happen like a couple of days in between somebody getting kicked off YouTube or getting kicked off Twitter and vice versa. But this is the first time I've ever seen it actually happen in tandem, which is interesting. I wonder if this is going to be a thing going forward where you're going to start seeing people kicked off of both platforms at the same time. I guess that remains to be seen. For those of you not familiar with Owen Benjamin, and especially Owen Benjamin's Twitter feed, it was quite something. It's kind of funny, after all this went down, I saw a lot of tweets about people saying about how Joe Rogan tried to warn him about this. So I went back and listened to that last podcast where Rogan was talking to Benjamin. And I agree with Rogan. I'm going to try to do the TLDR version of this because, like I said, I will be discussing this more in length later. But when you're on social media, there's things you can do, there's things you shouldn't do. There's ways that you can be incendiary on social media without setting yourself on fire. That being said, I absolutely do not agree with him being deplatformed. Obviously, I am a big First Amendment rights advocate. Just because you may say something that I don't like, or I don't like the way you say it, or I think that you could possibly have presented it in a better light, doesn't mean that I think that you should be deplatformed and shut down for that. Everybody has the right to express themselves freely. And I'm not okay with somebody being shut down just because somebody else doesn't like what you have to say. And that's kind of the overarching theme of all three of these stories, is these are three people who got their lives seriously fucked with because somebody else didn't like what they had to say. And I know this is kind of where we're at on social media now and on the internet in general, but I'm having a very hard time wrapping my head around the idea that there are people who, just because they don't like what you have to say, not that you even did anything to that person or to anybody else, just because they decided they don't like you, that they can just ruin your life. Like that's borderline sociopathic behavior in my opinion. Like, who the fuck are you to do that to someone? Like, I don't get it. I don't get ruining somebody's life because you disagree with something that they said. And like I said, I am a big fan of social media. I like social media, but I am willing to acknowledge that yes, there are very toxic parts of social media. And just all three of these stories happening on the same day just really kind of drove home how ugly it can get and just how cruel people can be. Like, I honestly don't understand the mentality of somebody who would read a tweet or an op-ed or just have a political disagreement with somebody and be like, you know what, I'm gonna ruin that person's life, fuck them. Like, I don't get that. I mean, that's behavior that and I hope any other sane, rational person would never in a million years think is okay to do. I mean, if you don't like somebody, fine, don't like them. If you have a political disagreement, fine, disagree. You're not under any obligation to engage with that person. Just because if Williamson wrote for The Atlantic didn't mean that you would be obliged to read his columns. You're not obliged to agree with everybody in your political movement about how it should go forward. And if you don't like somebody's tweets or you don't like somebody's YouTube videos, don't fucking watch them. Just block, don't bother to go on their YouTube channel, and just keep it moving. You don't have to do all this extra shit to somebody. Just ignore the person that you don't want to pay attention to and just move on. I don't get why this seems to be so difficult for some people, and that some people seem to take it so seriously and so to heart that you have to like hop up and spend time trying to get somebody's life ruined because you're so offended by something. It's like, no, just fucking ignore it and keep it moving. There's lots of things that offend me. I'm not trying to ruin somebody's life over it because I'm not an asshole. And like I said in the last podcast, and this is especially relevant to the Williamson Atlantic situation, this kind of bullshit needs to stop. Like, if you're going to keep ceding your ground to somebody who wants to complain about, oh, you hired this person or you hired that person, tell them the kid rocks. It's your fucking job. Like, why are you ceding ground to these people? Like, no, that shouldn't be how this works. It is how it works, but it shouldn't be. And at some point, somebody needs to start putting their foot down and telling people, no, just because you don't like this or you're offended by it or it hurts your feelings doesn't mean that that gives you the right to just make it go away. Because you know what? There's people that do like it and aren't offended by it and do enjoy it. And who are you to deprive those people of that person who they enjoy just because you got a bug up your ass and you decided, you know what? I don't like you, so you need to get gone. Okay, just had to get all that off my chest. I feel better now. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As per usual, always rate, comment, subscribe. I'm on Google Play, I'm on iTunes, I'm on Stitcher. And yes, I will be recording another podcast on Thursday. This isn't a substitute for that. This is just a little additional thing that I just wanted to talk about because it was bothering me. And I wanted to get it off my chest. So now I did. And now it's in your ears. And I hope you're not mad at me about that. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Take care. And until next time.